Speech off.
Hello there. This is your host and friend Prasanna Kumar Pincha back again with a new video and, of course, a new and interesting topic. The topic for today's discussion is not just interesting but is also of utmost contemporary relevance, and the topic reads structural barriers in the context of persons with disabilities. Now, friends, you will recall that maybe about 2-3 months back or so, I had uploaded one video in English and one in Hindi on barriers in the context of persons with disabilities, with particular reference to the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016, right? And in that context, I undertook a general discussion, and I also referred to the relevant section which defines of the RPD Act, which defines barriers, and I also stated that there are 9 factors, 9 main factors which actually generate barriers for persons with disabilities, which in turn hinder their full and effective participation in society on the basis on equal basis with others. Now, today, one natural question which you may ask is that since I have already uploaded a discussion on barriers in the context of persons with disabilities, why is it that I have just picked up one of these 9 factors that generate barriers, structural barriers, for discussion? I think that's a valid question, and the reason I have picked it up is that this expression, structural barriers, appears to have caused confusion in some quarters, leading to, in my opinion, not so correct interpretation. Well, here let me clarify that some barriers, some causes, or some factors that have been mentioned, some of these 9 factors, they actually overlap, and because of that overlap happening, there is a risk of one barrier being interpreted, one factor being interpreted as belonging to the other barrier. For example, sometimes something which is considered as a barrier because of social factors can also be considered as a barrier because of cultural factors. So that overlap actually also creates confusion, and I don't really blame those who interpret structural barriers in a different way. Now, I believe that since there is an overlap, we need to ensure that we as persons with disabilities, particularly those of us who have some understanding of the laws and rights issues of persons with disabilities, we interpret or develop an understanding of structural barriers in such a way that that understanding is right and also is in the larger interests of persons with disabilities. Let me clarify here that I do not mean to trivialize other people's interpretation or understanding of it. Now, some people tend to think that accessibility of roads or built environment, or for that matter mobility related issues, come under structural barriers. I really don't think so. Most respectfully, I submit that I don't think so. I believe that these barriers come under the environmental factor, and professionals have so far been doing this, and rightly so, because physical barriers such as built-in barriers or built in the built environment, barriers on the roads, mobility related issues, barriers in the transportation sector, barriers in the assistive technology sector such as websites, etc., all form part of the environmental barriers. Now, the question which one may then ask is then, what is what should one understand by structural barriers? Now, here, let me draw your attention to how poverty and marginalization, or how conditions, or how experts analyze the conditions of poverty and marginalization. Friends, while analyzing conditions of poverty and marginalization, the experts usually talk about the structural factors, and there they mean that the various societal institutions and the governmental institutions are such that there is nobody to represent the interests of these so-called weaker sections of society, such as those of our brothers and sisters who belong to the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other backward classes. Now, this explains why immediately after India got independence, a range of measures were adopted to ensure that these sections get an adequate representation in different institutions, societal institutions and government institutions, and even in government services, so that the Constitution of India provides for reservation of jobs for these categories of people. On the same analogy, I believe that the structural factors which cause barriers should be analyzed in the context of persons with disabilities. Say, for example, today we have various state public service commissions and the Union Public Service Commission. Now, neither in the state public service commissions nor in the Union Public Service Commission, at the highest decision-making body, there is representation of persons with disabilities, and the result is that certain decisions get taken which actually run counter to the interests of persons with disabilities. Now, for example, I don't think we have any member with a disability, any member of the Union Service Commission, Union Public Service Commission, who happens to be a member with a disability. So likewise, I don't think that there is any member of any state public service commission who happens to be a member with a disability. Of course, I only know of one example way back, years back, when one blind person was made the member of the State Public Service Commission of Bihar, and later on for a while he, I think, also became the chairman. No, I don't quite remember, but certainly he was a member. But that apart, that's a very rare exception. Otherwise, it has not happened. Similarly, on the Universities Grants Commission, on the top decision-making bodies, there is no representation of persons with disabilities, which is why sometimes certain decisions get taken that create a lot of issues for persons with disabilities. Even in the universities, at top bodies, usually there is no representation. Now, in Delhi University, we hear of certain things. We have been hearing lately of the university considering the possibility of conducting open book examinations. Now, had there been someone to represent the interests of persons with disabilities, this wouldn't even have been considered, I believe. So therefore, the fact of the matter is that structural barriers in the context of persons with disabilities would actually mean that the societal institutions and the government institutions where there is nobody to represent the interests of persons with disabilities cause a lot of barriers, and a lot of wrong decisions get taken accordingly. So therefore, we should have enough representation. This is one of the structural causes, and this structural causes, the interpretation and understanding of structural causes should be in line or should be in the manner in which the structural causes of poverty and marginalization are analyzed. I think because if you put all these physical barriers, built environment, barriers on the roads, and mobility related issues and transportation related issues, website related barriers, in the structural barriers, then what are you going to put in the environmental barriers? Actually, these barriers would appropriately come under the environmental barriers, and structural barriers would be the one that I said, that there is lack of representation of the interests of persons with disabilities in the various societal and government institutions and organizations. Now, for example, if in the UGC or in the top decision-making body of the Delhi University, there was some representative, say for example, of any of the national level apex organizations of the blind or of persons belonging to other categories of disabilities, probably many decisions which were taken and which subjected persons with disabilities to a lot of inconvenience would not have been taken. So this is what I am trying to convey, and this is why I am saying that structural that this interpretation and understanding of structural barriers is right, justified, and at the same time beneficial, and it serves the best interests of persons with disabilities, and hence this understanding and interpretation should be promoted, should be taken forward. This is my understanding, and I would like to repeat that I do not intend to downplay or trivialize anybody else's understanding that may be different. We live in a democracy. We have the right to interpret and understand things in our own way. So that's how it is. I felt that there was some confusion. There is some confusion in some quarters with regard to this, which is why I thought that this discussion would be appropriate, relevant, and timely. So do take care of yourself and keep your families and yourself safe and well protected. Bye.
Speech on. Stop. Button.